I was actually trying to get all of my slides sorted out, and I've got most of my slides figured today, so that's good news. I'm also waiting for YouTube to be able to catch up, because apparently it is sort of struggling to figure out whether it's going to be going live for me at my end. I'm not sure why that is the case, but I'm sure it'll catch up eventually. That way I can do a sort of a sound check. Like all of the things that I do here, there's always a questions and answers with a live stream. You always get an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to run a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll. And that's good. Right, so we've got YouTube catching up, which is excellent news. My suggestion to you is make sure you ask questions if you need to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. I'm going to give you a slideshow presentation, and then I'm going to open up to Q&A and questions and answers. So grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and let's get into this, shall we? And I will apologise now if I sound a little nasally, because I haven't been that well. This season is not good for me. In any case, let's get on with it, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, because like I usually do talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Today is a Dungeons and Dragons 5e core rules tutorial. This is lesson plan 3, and we're covering the complex combat mechanics in the game. Not the simple basic stuff, but the more complicated stuff that's a bit harder to understand. And I am aware that some explanation is usually required, and it's a bit more involved, these rules. So the overview for today is we're going to cover the hide action in combat. We're also going to talk about the ready action in a battle. How does a grapple work in a fight? And what makes shove different from a grapple? I'm going to explain the different cover rules. There are 3 different types of cover. And of course, I'm going to cover death saving throws for your character, and I will also sort of highlight death saving throws, or the lack of them, for your monsters or NPCs, or when you may use them. Okay. Then I'm going to cover some miscellaneous recommendations. Now, don't feel like if I have left something off this list that we can't talk about it, because we can, because I will explain everything I've just mentioned. I can't do demonstration this week, unfortunately. My desk is still unusable, and I can't really give you a practical playthrough at this present time, but I can do a Q&A or questions and answers at the end of my presentation, okay? So, if you are wanting to play the game and you don't have the rules, you can actually get the rules off D&D Beyond for free, won't cost you a thing. The basic rules are available and accessible online. You can also download a PDF of the original Dungeons & Dragons official website, and then you have a PDF copy if you want. They do periodically update it, but most of the time they haven't done very much with it recently. Let's start off with the first action that I know a few people have some questions around, and sort of how does this thing work? And that is the hide action. This requires you to use your main action, so you can't usually use a bonus action to activate or utilize hiding. This can be used by a character or a monster, and the idea is that you are unseen from a foe by making a dexterity or stealth check. Okay, and you're going to do this, and it's going to be opposed by a passive perception check or potentially a active perception check made by whoever you're trying to hide from. Now, when I say hide, you need to be able to usually have something to hide behind or something to hide in. But there are exceptions to this that are determined by the Dungeon Master. One of the things you'll find when you're doing your hide is whatever you get for your dexterity check or your stealth check, you have to score greater than the passive perception of whoever you're opposing, whether it be a monster or a character, a player character, and that's sort of just how it works. Now, that means if you're dealing with a passive perception, you have to get greater than the passive perception to be able to be successful. Now, hiding has some problems in combat, because it can mean that you are unseen but also unheard, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. You may potentially, when you do this, be able to hide your scent, But then again, it depends on the monster and the character. It can be, because hiding is really ultimately in combat about just being unseen. Whereas out of combat, it looks different. And I'm not going to explain that. So that's the hide action. And there are exceptions to when you would actually use hide in a different way, but I'm not going to cover them today. That would be too hard in this presentation. The ready action, probably one of the more confusing actions that you can utilize in the game. The ready action requires you to use your main action, so you don't use your bonus action, okay? That's a different thing again. A ready action can be used by a player character or by a monster. And what you do is you burn up your main action to be able to use your reaction not on your turn. Usually when you do a ready action, the intention is to be able to do something on somebody else's turn. And this is based on an act, okay, that you stipulate a trigger to. So you might select something that you're going to do with your action, or you might move. Any of those things are possible. And once it's triggered, that's what you do. Okay, so an example of this is maybe you decide to ready an action to move behind cover if somebody shoots at you. So you need to stipulate, if you don't want to get hit, that if somebody tries to fire a bolt at you, rather than somebody tries to shoot you, the Dungeon Master might read that as if somebody actually hits you with a bolt or misses you with a bolt. So you could wind up getting hit anyway. So make sure if you're going to stipulate that as your trigger for a ready action, that you word it in such a way that you're not actually going to get hit. Okay? Maybe you decide that what you would like to do is hold. There's not really a hold action, but we have a ready action. So you could say, I'm going to fire a bolt or an arrow at the monster if it does anything that looks aggressive or attacks my teammates. And that wouldn't actually take place unless the monster does what you have stipulated. That's a ready action. Probably one of the more complicated things to do in the game, and by far the most confusing for sure. Right, the next one is Grapple. Grapples look a little bit different. Grapple is a special melee attack, and this is designed to stop a creature's movement. It doesn't matter whether it's a character or a monster. It is designed ultimately to only stop a creature's movement. It doesn't apply anything else, okay? You don't get to, you're not restraining them in such a way that they can't fight back. They can. And yeah, and this is done by performing a contest between whoever decides to put the grapple on. They're going to use a strength athletics check. They need to get higher than the contested target. So when they make their strength athletics check, they must succeed against the target creature's strength athletics check or their dexterity acrobatics check to resist being held. So what this looks like is, if I have a fighter who decides they want to grapple the monster, I would make a strength athletics check, either one, you can call it either one, okay? It's essentially the same sort of thing. And I need to get greater than my number that I get when I add my modifier to my 20-sided dice roll. It needs to be greater, okay? Then the monster, who is going to make an opposed resistance check, and that is going to be either strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics check. Whichever one would be highest for that monster. That's how you would do it, Dungeon Masters. Now, why is the creature who is resisting allowed to use strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics, and yet the creature putting the grapple on is only allowed to use strength athletics? It's just how the designers have put the game together, okay? So you will notice there's a slight difference. Whoever puts on the grapple must use a strength athletics check. They cannot use a dexterity acrobatics check. That's only done if the creature is resisting the grapple. And that's how your grapple works. Pretty simple. Another action that's very similar to the grapple and has similar kind of mechanics tied to it and is also classified as a special melee attack is the shove. And the shove looks a bit like this. A shove is a special melee attack that either will knock a creature prone on the ground or pushes the creature back 5 feet away from whoever is trying to do the pushing. Okay, It is done by performing a contest between strength athletics check, okay? And you need to succeed. That means you need to get greater than. You can't get the same, can't get equal to. Okay, you must get greater than the target creature's strength athletics check or dexterity acrobatics check to resist the force of being shoved. So it's very much like a grapple. The only difference is you're trying to do something different with it. Instead of you trying to stop them moving, you're trying to push them to the ground, or you're trying to push them back. And that's the simplest way I can explain how that works. As long as you remember that they are contests, and with a contest, to be successful at a contest, you must get greater than whatever you're trying to resist, whoever's contesting you. All right, so let's talk about cover. Cover is probably one of those more complicated aspects. It's the one time where Dungeons & Dragons 5e is not a simple game to play because they haven't been elegant about the whole process. They've actually kind of resorted to using older mechanics from older versions of Dungeons & Dragons, frankly. So let me explain what cover is. Cover can make it more difficult for an attack to hit you or a spell to hit you. Now that might be an attack with a weapon, whether it's ranged or a melee attack. It could be a spell. Usually, most of the time, you're using cover and to avoid being struck by ranged attacks, whether that might be a spell being cast at you or an arrow being fired at you, okay, or something else. And basically, that stops that attack to a certain degree, or potentially, it could be against a player character, it could be against a monster. And there are 3 types of cover in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. The first one is half cover. And that means when you have half your body covered, then you are granted a +2 bonus to your armor class. So that means whatever your armor class is, your AC, it is now going to go up by +2. Your Dungeon Master will tell you if you get a +2 to your armor class for the cover that you're using. So it makes sense to use cover when you can. You also get a +2 to a dexterity saving throw. So if you have to make a dexterity saving throw from something that requires you to do that, such as Fireball, then you would add a +2 because of the cover. Yeah. There are some things that circumvent cover, and the spells actually stipulate that. Okay, next one is 3/4 cover. That's when 3/4 of your body is covered up. So you probably will only see up to the chest, or the just where the shoulder and the armpit are. That's probably the only part of the creature you can see. That's 3/4 cover. Okay. Also, 3/4 cover might be something like looking at somebody through an arrow slit that's very narrow. Or somebody who's just peeking over a battlement on a castle. This will grant you a +5 bonus to armor class. So that means your armor class, whatever it was, now has a +5 to it. So it's going to get a big, huge increase. Or you get a +5 to your dexterity saving throw should you have to make a dexterity saving throw against an attack. That's the second type of cover. The last one is probably the most useful cover you can acquire, and it's actually pretty easy to gain if you're smart, and that is total cover. This means the creature can't be targeted by an attack or a spell usually, and that means you can't actually see the target because you are completely covered. There's nothing of you showing anymore. The only time that total cover might not be effective is if you have something that is an area effect and it can move around a wall. Like if there's the edge of the wall ends and you're just on the edge of the wall on the other side, whatever the effect is might be able to spread around there and still affect that area, okay? Because of the size or radius that the spell or the effect has. So there are some times where total cover would not be very effective. Certainly area effect spells and area effect effects or abilities, not so effective. But generally it's very effective because you can't be targeted at all. So those are the 3 different types of cover in the game that you'll experience. The last mechanic, a mechanic that I get a lot of questions about and causes so much confusion and for obvious reasons, and that is death saving throws. Death saving throws look like this. There's lots of different moving parts for it. It is a saving throw, but it's not a normal saving throw. In other words, when you make this saving throw, you're not going to be adding anything to your dice roll. So what this means is you perform a death saving throw at the start of a character's turn if they are on 0 hit points and they're not already dead. So if you haven't been killed outright and you're just bleeding out, this is what it represents. When you reach 0 hit points, you're not dead unless you've taken an enormous amount of damage that was equal to your maximum damage. So in other words, if you would fall below 0 and be at negative whatever your maximum hit points are, that would instantly kill you. That usually doesn't happen to a character. You usually wind up just dying, but not dead. And that's why we make a death saving throw. And so we need to determine whether you will actually going to die or not. Or will you stabilize, or will you get back up? So we roll one 20-sided dice, or a d20. If you roll a 10 or higher, this counts as a success, okay? And if you roll a 9 or less, this counts as a failure. If you unfortunately roll a 1, this will count as 2 failures. And if you roll a 20 on the d20, okay, if you roll that 20 and you get a 20, a natural 20, you regain 1 hit point. And you do so at the beginning of your turn, which means you can now stand up and do something if you want to. Now, even with that part of it there, it's not over yet, because you have to have 3 cumulative successful death saving throws to stabilize. So you'll notice on your character sheet that there are like 3 circles, 1 for failure and 1 for success. Okay, so 3 for successes and 3 for failures. So when you get 3 cumulative successful saving throws, you are stable and you're no longer dying, but you don't get up. Okay, you are unconscious still, okay, and still vulnerable. Now this would apply to a character. Okay, if you get 3 cumulative failures before you get your 3 successes, then the result is the character dies. That's how death saving throws work. Now, I think what I need to explain to you also is that normally monsters and NPCs do not get a death saving throw because they're not superhuman. They aren't the main characters, and the Dungeon Master can replace their monsters and NPCs with other stuff. There will be occasions where a Dungeon Master will decide that their monster or NPC is so important it should also have death saving throws. This is kind of rare. That doesn't come up a lot. Not unless you're dealing with a major player in the game and it's really important that they have the same sorts of features and benefits as a player character. But generally, when you knock a monster down to 0 hit points, it's dead and it's probably not coming back. Now, you might be thinking, all right, hang on, I understand when making a saving throw that I'm supposed to add a modifier, and all I've said is just roll one 20-sided dice. I didn't say anything about adding anything to that. And there's a reason for this. Because a death saving throw is not a strength saving throw. It's not a dexterity saving throw. It's not a constitution saving throw, surprisingly. It's not an intelligence saving throw or a wisdom saving throw or even a charisma saving throw. It falls outside of the realm of those 6 different types of saving throws. It is simply a very random element that allows a player character to keep rolling dice in the game to see if they get to come back into the game or whether they will be out for this combat. And that's really all it's there. It's to ensure that players don't sit there and wind up twiddling their thumbs waiting for the combat to finish to determine whether they can bring their character back to life or whether they need to make a new character or something like that. So that's the basics around death saving throws. Now, I have some recommendations for those of you who are playing and you're finding yourself in some awkward situations and not too sure what to do. And my recommendations, my miscellaneous recommendations, are the following. When unsure what to do, apply either an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw to determine if it works. So if you're trying to do something in combat and you're unsure what it would be because it hasn't stated exactly this particular action in the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide, these are the things you would use. Ability checks, skill checks, attack rolls, saving throw. Okay, it's going to be one of those. and probably nothing else. There are some rare occasions where you might wind up doing an ability check or a skill check, and it's a contest, but that's not always going to be the case. Otherwise, just allow automatic success or failure if you think that whatever somebody's trying to do, it makes sense that they would be able to do so. Like if whatever they're trying to do doesn't seem to have a chance of failure, then let them just have success. And if it looks like it would be impossible to do, and there's no way that they can actually rip the whole building off the ground and hurl it across to China, then don't let them have a roll or any dice roll to say it fails, it's not successful. That's the easiest way to deal with dice mechanics in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Now, I'm hoping that this was useful to you and that you got what you needed from here. And if you didn't, that's all right, because you're going to use the comments section to ask your questions and give feedback where you need to. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, I'm not gone. I am just getting myself prepared for either a string of questions, or somebody's going to point out that I missed something, or somebody's going to say that I was wrong about something. That's always possible. But generally, I'm making sure that these classes are actually got good notes so that they don't have that problem. Okay, so right now, this is the time to go, look, hashtag question is really helpful because it makes it stand out for me. But just ask your questions, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Some questions I may not be able to answer. I will make a note of them and come back to them at a later date. This is an ongoing class, so you don't have to worry about it. There'll be another one next week. We'll be covering magic. If you want to support this class and other classes that I do on YouTube, these live streams, then I would have to say that Patreon's the smartest way. You can pay as little as $1 a month, and that keeps things going, and everything that I do here eventually winds up on Patreon. Okay, I may not have been able to get everything there straight away, but I'm still in the process of transitioning a lot of my slides into 4K slides so that you're getting a 4K experience rather than just a high definition experience for those of you who are watching on a TV. Okay. All right, let's have a look at the Q&A, and then let's say hi to some people. So, do you find some combat mechanics difficult to understand in Dungeons & Dragons 5e? 29% said yes out of 14. So I really want those people to ask me some questions. If there's some questions that you're struggling with, and I can help you now, well, this is the time, right? 7% said no. Interesting. Sometimes 64%. Fair enough. I think we all have that. And I put the last thing in there. I don't play 5e, 0. That's just me deciding, oh, I'll fill up all my options. Okay. Hello, Cole. How's it going? Okay, let's just have a look at your question. Good question. So, Cole, you're talking about the shove action. So when you decide to shove a creature or a monster or an NPC, even if if you're a player character, yes, you need to be stipulating to the dungeon master, yes, that my intention is when I shove, I'm going to knock them prone or I'm going to push them 5 feet away. Okay. I think what you're talking about here, Cole, is I decide to shove the creature, but you haven't decided what you want to do with the shove, right? That's probably where you're coming from, is that I tell the dungeon master I'm going to shove the creature, but I haven't decided whether I want to knock them prone or push them back 5 feet. So just tell your dungeon master, I'm going to shove the creature or monster, but I'm not sure if I want to knock them prone or push them back 5 feet, and then just make a decision and then go from there. That's the easiest way to deal with that, right? I think you'll find that most dungeon masters are happy for you to stipulate, I'm shoving the creature, and then they'll say, roll your dice, and then they'll roll their dice. And yeah, I know some dungeon masters much prefer for you to stipulate exactly what you're doing with your shove before you roll dice. And that is just simply common courtesy, I think. For me, it's not a big deal, but then again, I'm not necessarily going to be your dungeon master, right? Okay, so Cole, if that answered your question, there you go. Hello, Seeker, how are you? I have a feeling I'll be referring back to this vid in future. So Seeker, you can refer back to this video if you like, but I do actually have a lot of very short videos that cover a lot of the mechanics. They're quite old videos now, but they have dice and miniatures and maps, and I demonstrate a lot of this stuff. So you can refer back to this, but this is an ongoing class. So this class that's around the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules, there's a reason why in the title it says #1. This is just the first cycle. So we'll cycle back through this. So next week there'll be another one, but we'll be covering magic next week. Same time, same day, I'll be covering the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules, okay? And then when I complete the 4 programs or 4 tutorials around this, then I start again and go back to the beginning. So you can refer back to this video by all means, but I wouldn't concern you himself too much because they'll roll round and you'll be able to come back to this stuff. When I get an opportunity, I will cut them down into 4K videos and release them as sort of short snippets. So you get just the information. So you can sort of quickly do a search. I need to know about death saving throws and it'll pop up, but it'll take me a little while to get that done. Hello, Spirit Wolf. How's it going? And Shiner81, hello. Joseph, hello, how are you? Now, it looks like you have is this a question or a statement? I'm not entirely sure if it's a question or a statement. So, hit dice and constitution modifier relationship. Okay. I think what you're talking or referring to is how are hit dice related to the constitution modifier or the constitution. I think the question that you're looking at, hello Blade Roberts, by the way, Blade Roberts is a patron and supports me so that I can continue doing these classes every week and all the other classes that I run on this channel. How's it going, Robert? Now, I think what your question is about is more around the short rest, right? Joseph, I think that's your question, is actually around the short rest and how you use hit dice and the constitution modifier. Because in most respects, hit dice, or the number of hit dice that you have, right, is determined by your level. So if you're character level 1, then you have 1 hit dice. And all the different classes have different hit dice. So some have a 6-sided dice, some have an 8-sided dice, some have a 10-sided dice, some have a 12-sided dice. Like, I'm pretty sure the Barbarian has a 12-sided dice. So that's what the hit dice is all about. And we use hit dice when we want to reclaim hit points or regain hit points. Yep. And we do that during a short rest if we're going to use hit dice. If we're having a long rest, we don't need to worry about hit dice at all. The only thing is that it resets the number of hit dice we regain, because we can only get half our hit dice back on a long rest. So once we use all our hit dice, okay, to get them back, we have to have a long rest, but we only get half on a long rest. So that means you need to usually rest twice to get all of them back. If you're an odd level, like if you're level 3, you would have 3 hit dice. And the idea behind having 3 hit dice at level 3 is you've got more hit points, obviously, because you need to have them. But because if you use 2 of your hit dice in your level 3, you can only ever reclaim half, which is 1.5 hit dice. You can't have a 0.5 hit dice. We round down, which means ultimately you wind up only regaining 1 if you spent 2. So it takes 3 long rests to get all of your hit dice back if you use all of them up all at once. Does that make sense? Which can be, frankly, a complete pain in the ass to track, and highly confusing for you as a dungeon master and for players. Now, Constitution modifier just represents the modifier you add to the hit dice when you're using a short rest to regain hit points. So I decide I'm going to roll one of my hit dice, and I'm a wizard, so I roll a 6-sided dice. I then look at my Constitution modifier, and that then adds onto that. So that's the extra bit that I get for being a bit tougher than normal. Okay, it just, the Constitution modifier just determines the extra amount of hit points you can reclaim, and also the extra, when you're determining your maximum hit points, it also determines the overall maximum you can get. The higher your Constitution modifier, the more times you get that benefit. So every time you level up, you get to add your Constitution modifier. So if it's a +2 and you're level 3, then you would get to add that 3 times, and of course you would add that to whatever your hit dice are when you level up. Is that confusing enough? I mean, look, when we talk about hit dice and Constitution modifiers, like, it's not a fun topic. You will let me know if I wasn't clear, Joseph, and I'll see if I can break it down better if I need to. All right. Hello, Alec. How are you? Hello. Bergstrom. Where are you from, Alec? I know I've seen your face before. I've seen the little icon. You know I have. Cole. This isn't really a question that has to do with combat, but what books would you recommend other than the Player's Handbook as a DM? Player's Handbook and DM Guide. Okay. So what books? It depends, Cole, what you are. What are you? Are you a dungeon master or are you a player? So that's the question. I'm happy to recommend some books to you if you're a dungeon master, and I'm happy to recommend some books to you if you're a player, but it would be different. Okay. Because it's going to vary. How's it going, JP? Well, let's get real. Combat maneuvers and monk attacks, they get complicated for sure. I'm doing all right, as it happens, Robert. Right, so let's have a look here. Cool. So Shiner, your question, Grapple. Let's deal with that while I'm waiting. Cole is a DM. Okay, so Shiner, I will answer your question on grappling, but let me answer Cole's question first. If you are a player and you're looking to buy books, I would always go with the Player's Handbook, and then probably after that, I would not buy anything else unless your Dungeon Master states that they're actually going to use other supplements. Yep. Now, as a Dungeon Master, if I was buying books and I needed to do something, I would probably, in terms of books, I would first download the free basic rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, which is free. It's a PDF. I can access it on D&D Beyond for free as well. So I would get access to that first. At that point, if your players are wanting to use all the options in the Player's Handbook, you probably want that, because the vast majority of the rules are still in the basic rules, but all the player options aren't there as well. And if you want to be able to keep a track of all of that, because there's so many spells as well, like, you probably want the Player's Handbook. Yep. You actually do get a lot of the monster stat blocks that you would need to run the game off D&D Beyond for free. They're a part of the basic rules. And you can also get a whole bunch of the different mechanics that are involved in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Not all of them, but some of the most important ones are actually part of the basic rules. There's a player and basic combat or basic rules section. So player stuff, not all of it, basic rule stuff, and then some Dungeon Master stuff. But they have a whole array of stat blocks of monsters. Now, if you're going to buy another book other than the Player's Handbook, I would go with the Monster Manual, not the Dungeon Master's Guide. Why? Because the Dungeon Master Guide for Dungeons & Dragons 5e is not that useful to you, frankly. What you're more going to find much more useful for yourself is to actually have the Monster Manual. Why? Because it has all the stories and lore of the monsters in there. That is your catalyst for creating your own adventures. Yeah. Not only that, it has all the stat blocks that aren't part of the free PDF that you can download. because not all of them are that are in the monster manual, all the monsters in the monster manual are part of the free thing that you can download. That's what I would go with next. If you really want to buy a third book, then yes, you could buy the Dungeon Master's Guide. And that does have a lot of stuff in there, but frankly, I wouldn't say that the 5e Dungeon Master Guide is the best Dungeon Master Guide out there. I find myself looking at other resources, and I guess I've done reviews on books that I thought were very good. I actually think that the Pathfinder First Ed Edition Game Master Guide is a very good book. You know, in terms of a Dungeon Master Guide, it does a very good job. There are things that the 5e game Dungeon Master Guide does better, but I found that Pathfinder book is actually pretty good too. Another book that I would say, and then it's probably going to go out of print, is I think that Volo's Guide to Monsters is actually a very important book, primarily because it gives you a sort of it gives you a lot of the monster layers and explains how they are structured. So you know, things like kobolds and what an orc camp would look like, what a mind flayer's lair would look like. A lot of that stuff's there. That's really useful to you. It's not just maps and a basic isometric look at it. It gives you sort of how they operate there and what those different areas are used for. That can be very useful for a dungeon master. And there's quite a few there. Like, I mean, I will probably go over a lot of that stuff because I know it's going to go out of circulation. Does that answer your question, Cole? If you've already got those, I'm happy to, you know, mention. I don't recommend getting Monsters of the Multiverse. I don't think that will serve you very well. If you are new to the game, I would just stick with the Monster Manual for now, because you won't really find that you get any major value out of the Monsters of the Multiverse book, in my opinion. If you're going to buy another monster book at any time, then I would go with the Tome of Beasts, the very first one that Kobold Press put out. It's the sort of stuff that you use when your players are a bit more experienced and they need a bit more of a challenge, because really a lot of the monsters in the original Monster Manual for 5e are pretty tame. They're not very difficult to destroy once you know what you're doing, and they're not very exciting. They're a bit on the boring side at times. Like, there are some monsters there that just bite, claw, and that's it. And then there's not much else going on. Okay, Shiner, your question. Just let me grab a lozenge because I'm going to lose my voice otherwise, and I don't want to do that. Shiner81, your question, Grapple. That's a good question. Can a mounted player grapple a ground-based monster? And if so, when they move, do they use their mount's half speed to drag the monster? Well, I think the easy question is, it's up to the dungeon master. If it makes sense that you could sit on a mount, like a horse or something like that, and grab a monster because it's tall enough, then yeah, you probably could grapple it. As for dragging it, using the mount's movement makes much more sense than using half your own movement, because you're not the one actually moving, right? The mount is doing the moving. So that actually makes a lot of sense. I guess the question is, you need to decide, like, you know, if you grapple a creature, you can only grapple a creature that is one size larger than you. Yep. So if you're trying to grapple a medium-sized creature and you're on a horse, you only need one hand. So essentially what it looks like is you just grab them with your hand and you're going to drag them along wherever the horse goes, right? That's easy enough to do. That doesn't seem to go out of the realm of possibilities. A larger creature, a bit more difficult, but still possible within the guidelines of Dungeons and Dragons 5e. And it actually probably makes more sense that the horse or the mount you're on, being larger, is able to actually drag the other creature. You are, unfortunately, the linking pin and getting the stretch factor going on here. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, Shiner81. You probably can grapple a creature if you're mounted on a beast of some kind that you're riding around, and the monster's on the ground. Yep. Joseph, okay, here we go. Do you think buying any 5e books are worth it right now since D&D 1 is coming out with some changes? Look, Joseph, it depends on the books that you're buying. It depends on the types of books that you're going to purchase. So if you're buying a book for player options, I wouldn't do it. Okay? My understanding is that Wizards of the Coast is doing it. Essentially, there is some true playtesting taking place right now, but a lot of it is marketing. They've probably got most of it already set out. The only problem is that the game is not really set in concrete at any end. Like, it's not like you're dealing with a finished product. They don't know what the interplay between the basic rules are going to be like with character features. If you buy a book and it's got monster stat blocks in it, those monster stat blocks probably won't survive the changes to the core rules and or the character classes at this point. If you're buying a book and it's got player options in it, like races, backgrounds, although backgrounds I don't think it's going to matter too much. It's only the feat that you get level 1 that might mess things up a little bit. It's a pretty easy fix though, I guess, if you don't mind fixing it, that is. I think the only stuff that they're going to put out that's really going to be useful to you are things that don't need to worry about mechanics. So fluff books, just lore books, things with maps in them. You'll always find a use for. It doesn't matter what version of the game it is, you'll always find a way of using it. I've just recently bought the new Spelljammer Adventures in Space books, and I already see problems with those books. I see some things in it that I think are great and I can use anywhere, and I see other things where I'm like, this is a different animal. I don't want to say don't buy their books, but I have to say, over the past year, I've found myself more disappointed with what they've put out rather than happier. And I don't get given the books. Like, it's not like they send me any stuff. Okay, they don't send books to me to review. Wizards of the Coast is not going to send them to New Zealand. Okay, even AJ Pickett doesn't get stuff sent to him. They'll give him everything on D&D Beyond for free, and they've been doing that for ages. But that'll never happen to me. I'm too aggressive about their product. Do you know what I mean? I don't really bet. I'm just way too honest about the whole thing. I'm not very good at playing that game. So I would look at people's reviews and book flip throughs, so you can get an idea of whether you like the idea of purchasing a book. I think that's the thing that most of us try to do, is we look at the internet and we see what other people say about a book. Can we trust what they say? And we make our decision. And then if we like what we see and we hear, then we go and buy it. I will, once my office is sorted out, I will try to do flip throughs of a lot of the books that I have sitting on my shelf that I haven't reviewed. But you'll find a lot of the reviews that I do have on my channel are usually, if it's the live stream, it's just my face and me talking. But if it's an edited video, it's usually me talking while I flip through the book, so you can actually see what's in it. So right now, I don't know about buying their stuff. Not if you really have, tight funds, and it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. If spending money matters, then maybe just wait. Okay, Alec, how's it going? How do I adjudicate rules for watery terrain? I usually treat all terrain as difficult terrain. Like, if most of you'll notice that in the past versions of the game, we had different speeds of movement for different things, right, Alec? And you're probably aware of this already. So I don't know if you played 3.5 or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but you're probably aware of that sort of thing. So what I find is, if they're climbing, it's half speed. If they are swimming, it's half speed. If they're crawling, it's half speed. So if they're walking through watery terrain that's up to their ankle, up to their knees, then I would consider that half movement, that they move half their speed. Yep. If they're swimming, half speed. That just makes it really simple, and that's usually what I do with it. Look, the rules for fighting underwater are a little They're very, very basic and simple. At least it's only a couple of paragraphs compared to what we've had in the past. They do leave you kind of wondering what to do at times. But yeah, that's in terms of movement. In terms of combat, I just follow what's in the player's handbook because I don't see any good reason to do something different with it at this time. Yeah, does that make sense? Magic fire can explode underwater. I just assume that's, if you cast a spell, it's a firebolt. Yep, yeah, you can still be burnt. You can do all sorts of things with that, but yeah, I just don't worry about that sort of thing. Joseph, yep, if you got your answer and that was a good answer, good, cool, right. JP, complex combat mechanics equals the many versatile monk attack options, weapon, unarmed, monk traits and skills. Question? No, it's not a question. I would say the fighter's battle master is one of those too. That's pretty complicated stuff going on there, but that's for people who like that complexity. I like playing a monk, and JP knows this, but then also like playing a wizard. I don't know what it is. It's funny, I've always been about make things simple, but I do gravitate towards classes that are a bit more complicated than normal. So Cole, Cole, you got the answer you wanted. So Alec, you're from California, USA. Ah, you're Scandinavian in descent, right? Well, I mean, you know, my ancestors obviously didn't start in New Zealand, so yeah. Scandinavian. I was just trying to remember, I know somebody who's kind of from that region. Anyway. Cole, what do you got here? Yep, that's great. I'm going to the monster manual and a story module. Do you have an adventure recommendation? I have Lost Mine of Phandelver and the Essentials kit. I would run in the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Save the Essentials kit for another time. Like you don't need to run that together. I know some people like to combine the two. You could, but I would recommend just run the Lost Mine of Phandelver, save the Essentials kit for some of the time, jump into some of the classes where I explain to people how to go about Dungeon Master preparation and making their own stuff, and then build your own campaign after you've finished the Lost Mine of Phandelver, or build your own adventures. Or just pinch the stuff we make on my channel. Or just download it from Patreon if you want to do that. Like that's what I would recommend, Cole. There are also plenty of resources out there where you can just drop in short adventures. I kind of talked about that the other day. Kobold Press prepared a dozen short adventures. The Book of Layers by Kobold Press, another really good book that you can drop stuff in fairly easily. Do you know what I mean? But I think after that, you probably, if you've got a bit of time, then you can probably just make your own stuff after that. And I've made sure that the channel will actually allow you to learn how to do that. And there's a lot of people are doing, I noticed there's more live streams showing you how to build worlds, make adventures, build monsters and stuff like that than there ever has before. And you're going to get plenty of that on this channel. But yeah, there are other channels that do that as well. Yeah. Hopefully they got your you got the answer you wanted, Cole. Player modules, Joseph. Okay, so player modules. Yeah, no, I would avoid anything that's player option stuff. I would tend to avoid that. I wouldn't. I would stay away from anything that's supposed to be designed for just a player. There's too much time left to go, and although I think their path is pretty much set, if they present something to the community and the voice is loud and very negative, they will change it. They will be like, no way are we going to risk everybody not buying this product or hating on this product because even if you get a good sales to begin with, and I've had this argument with people before, even if you convince people to buy the book first and they hate it but they never use it and then they resell it, what happens is they talk to other people, it winds up on the internet, and then suddenly your sales after the first couple of weeks or months disintegrate. Do you know what I mean? That's what you don't want to do with a book that you've spent a lot of time on, is you want them to keep coming back and buying the book for as long as possible. That's why the original starter box set in Lost Mine of Phandelver has sold so many copies. So many copies. Do you know what I mean? I mean, also it's a starter box set, so they do tend to sell a lot of those anyway, but they've made a lot of starter box sets, and that original one has sold more than anything else. Yeah? What do you got here, Cole? I think the future is going to just be changes to 5e, which are completely optional. I don't think that will be the case. No, I think you'll find that most of the old books will become obsolete, but we can disagree on this. That's all right. Do you know what I mean? Time will tell. I've always found that when they have a new Ed edition, which we are getting a new Ed edition, you've got to remember, like, a lot of the stuff they're presenting to us is not like it hasn't been done before. Do you know what I mean? How's it going, 12 Ziggy? I'll get to your comments in a second, but let me just talk about the fact that you've got to understand that the D20 test that they're talking about, like, I mean, it's just semantics. All they're doing is by saying D20 test, bucketing things like ability scores, ability checks, skill checks, saving throws, attack rolls all together, is so that they all fall under the same guidance and rules. Because right now, we don't get exactly the same rules around them. Do you know what I mean? Everything's sort of off in different directions. In the past, in older versions of the game, if you rolled a natural 20 for an ability check or an attack roll, for an attack roll it was an automatic hit. Like, you hit no matter what. Didn't matter what the modifiers were, you hit. If it was an ability check or a skill check, you succeeded. And they changed that when we went to 5e. So now they're trying to go back because they realised that nobody's playing that way. It's inconsistent with the other rule that they have around attack rolls. Why is attack rolls working this way, but not ability checks, skill checks, or saving throws? And yet so many tables are just doing that because when you explain to new people in particular, hang on, a natural 20 on your 20-sided dice is only a success for an attack roll, they don't understand. They just assume that it would apply to all the 20-sided dice rolls that you do. And it probably should work that way. Those of us who've been playing for a very long time have already played with those rules. Some people never actually adopted the 5e rules around how a natural 20 worked. They just said, if you roll a natural 20, you always succeed on ability checks, skill checks, saving throws, and attack rolls, like you hit with an attack roll. So it's not a new concept. And the same applies to rolling a natural 1, which is when you miss on an attack. Well, natural 1 in the past was like, well, you fail. And then there were additional rolls if you wanted to use critical fumbles. But a natural 1 was like, you failed, you can't succeed on this. These rules have always existed, either as part of the core mechanics of older versions of the game, or as variant rules that people were using and have been still using right now. So I can assure you that the older books will be obsolete in some respects, okay? But the thing that to understand is whatever they do in the future, you're still going to have attack rolls, you're still going to have ability checks, you're probably still going to have skill checks, which is actually a relatively new concept. You're still going to be performing tool proficiency checks, which is basically just another type of ability check. You're still going to be making saving throws. They've all been there in the past, they just looked a little bit different. None of that's actually disappearing. That's all going to stay in some respect. It's just how the details are worked out are going to change. Do you know what I mean? I would love it if they just made the game of Dungeons and Dragons just a very stripped down version of the game with lots of little optional rules you could tack on. I think that's where they should have gone. That's what they promised us. You know, 3 game systems, super basic, like you could a 5-year-old could play it. That's why we never got that game. we got the standard game, and then we got the couple of variant roles we could tack on that you were in either the player's handbook or in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that was it. Okay, how's it going there, Ziggy? I was about to suggest the Battle Master, yeah. You're considering making one for the team support options. Yes, the Battle Master does have a lot of team support options. Paladin has an enormous amount of stuff. I mean, not just that aura. Bards are very sort of supportive as well, but yeah, Battle Master, I agree. Have you seen any sticking points with the Battle Master combat stuff? No. To be honest, Ziggy, the Battle Master was never one of my favourite to play, even though I like playing Monk and I like playing Wizard because they are a bit on the complex side. Battle Master is obviously another animal in itself in terms of the martials. I guess for me, I like the idea that it exists because I've seen people who played it and they played it really well, and they were quite happy with the fact that they had all these options, and it wasn't just about I swing my sword and then I hit. They could do a lot of stuff with their dice. But I never really saw anything in the Battle Master that would upset me as a Dungeon Master and said, is there a problem here? No, I don't really think there was. Not really. I think, if anything, the Battle Master needed to have some stuff that didn't rely on rolling dice for a benefit. There's too much stuff in the game right now where you have to have a dice roll to determine whether your thing works. And this is one of the things that I think the marshals need, is they need to have some benefits that just work all the time and that are not related to combat, so that they can actually shine in exploration and they can shine in social interaction. And I know some people say, well, no, that's the rogue, Fred, and that's the ranger. And I'm like, well, no, there needs to be times when even something like your fighter can shine appropriately. I mean, I don't think the paladin needs that much help, frankly. They've got a lot going on already, although I still think there's something you can do with that. And even the monk has probably got too many combat-focused things there. Anyway. That makes a lot of sense, Ziggy? Okay, good. Joseph. Lost Mine can take a long time with a slow group. Laugh out loud. Yes, it can. Don't feel bad about that, though. If you're dealing with new people, they don't know what to make of what they're dealing with. They don't know what fast is and slow is. They don't know whether the choices they're making are going to be successful or not. They've got nothing to base there's no experience to base off what they understand is like going to work for them. And as soon as they experience character death, it'll be completely obvious to them that there are times where things might not go too well. That's the most obvious one, right? But when a group goes slow in Lost Mine of Phandelver, you may find that they're also aware that things might not go the way they wanted, and it had nothing to do with combat. And it might be like, I wanted to befriend the wolves and I wasn't able to. I was unsuccessful. And they don't, in their head, they're thinking, well, why couldn't I do that? And there might be legitimate reasons why the Dungeon Master said, no, that can't be done. Or the dice just weren't on their side. So they go slower. They take their time. I find that if your group is going slow, Joseph, they're probably having a really good time. If you ask them, do you feel like the game is going too slow, and they say no, the reason they're going slow is and taking their time is that they're just enjoying themselves. I always find that the group is usually very, very healthy when they show up every week, and yet their progress is very slow and they spend quite a lot of time just chatting about stuff. You'll find that your group is actually incredibly healthy at that point. Cole, I thought they weren't going to make a new edition, but instead just make continuous expansions to 5e for 1D&D. Cole, that is that. So, I actually talked about this in a live stream, and I've put out an edited video on the topic. You know, is this the last? Is there no more editions? So, Cole, to give you an idea, one of the things that Wizards of the Coast knows, and Hasbro, but particularly Wizards of the Coast knows, is that every time they do a revision and reprint the core books, there's going to be some changes to the rules. And every time that happens, it fractures the community, and you have a whole lot of people that stay with the old game system and a whole lot of people that play the new game system. And the people playing the old game system don't buy the new books, and so they wind up getting less money than they were hoping to get. And so marketing people in that company tell them, and they do this every single time they do this, tell them you need to alleviate their fears that we are creating a new edition of the game, that it is the same edition of the game, and we just want them to buy the new books. That's all they're trying to communicate. Now, it's a bit of a lie, because it is a big fat lie, frankly, but they did the same thing around going from, what was it, version 3 of the game, when Wizards of the Coast took it over. Version 3 of the game, and then we had 3.5. And there was a fracture of the community when that happened. Yeah, maybe not as bad as some of the other ones have been, but each time they do this, every time they say, look, you know, this is the game. We're not going to do anything major after this. We're stopping. Do you know what I mean? We're not going to do that. We're not going to make you buy new core books. We'll just keep printing this over and over again. It's not true, because then we had 3.5, had slight changes, not actually that different. And a bit of a cleanup, and then I re-released a whole lot of new core books. Do you know what I mean? And then we had 4E, which was actually quite a different game. But again, the talk and the speech around that going from 3.5 was, at its core, it's still Dungeons and Dragons, you know? And they tried to sell a virtual tabletop, which they never got to work, a three-dimensional virtual tabletop, which they never were able to actually get to work properly. And it died in its development, because Wizards of the Coast are really bad at that sort of thing. And then when we went from version 4 and we're going to version 5, they said, look, we're taking the best elements of every part of the game, and this will be like the ultimate version, because we're going to give you a game that has 3 engines. Super basic, anybody can play, you know, like a 5-year-old. Standard game, most people will play that. And then the more advanced one, which is a whole lot of rules you can tack on. And then we won't do anything with the game after that. That'll be the end of it. But they didn't do that, did they? And now we're moving into this, and they do this roughly. It can be anywhere from every 5 to 7 to 10 years. It depends. There's been about 12 to 13 versions of the game, and I do include Pathfinder in there, because Pathfinder is an open game license who is only able to print their stuff because they are in fact using the vast majority of the game mechanics that were designed for version 3 or 3.5. And so you can't consider it a new and completely different game unless you stop using strength, dexterity, intelligence, constitution, wisdom, yeah, charisma, that sort of thing. Attack rolls, not so much a problem, but the way you calculate them, yes it is. Armor class, hit points. So Pathfinder is just a clone of D&D. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so Cole, I hope I answered that question. Okay, Spirit Wolf. Hello, Spirit Wolf. How's it going? Did I actually say hi to you before? Sorry if I'm taking a long time to notice you, okay? How's it going, Nick G? And Big Kid is here. Hello, Notorious. Hi, Drew. Okay, let's go back to where was I? Spirit Wolf has just reminded me I need to take a break before continuing. You've got me for almost an hour after this. So give me 5 minutes. Let me find let's see if I'll get Arnold Schwarzenegger to keep you busy for a little while. And I'll be back in about 5 minutes. And I will continue. So write down all your questions so that I have some questions to answer when I get back in about 5 minutes. crawl back in here. Okay. Yes, that means I'm back again. And thank you, Arnold Schwarzenegger, for keeping everybody busy. Okay, let's go back to chat. Right. Do we have some more questions? Hopefully we do. Where was I up to? I think Spirit Wolf reminded me to take a break, so I've done that. What do you got here, Nick? Fighters should just gain benefits of all the weapon feats. Okay, Crusher, Piercer, Slasher. For me, Nick, I don't even think that the Crusher, Piercer, Slasher feats should exist. I've always viewed a lot of the feats that they create as just a way of conning the player base and people who play the game into buying more of their garbage. Frankly, I know people like the idea, like, you know, we want to be able to do more stuff, and the only way to get it is to have a feat. And the problem is we can never get enough feats to do all the things we would like to do. And this was always the problem in 3.5 and version 3. I think that I think what's going to happen is feats will probably wind up becoming, instead of being optional, they'll be hard baked into the game. I think that was a mistake. I think it's one of the things that will drive people away. I know a lot of people already use feats, but the reality is their surveys are based off people who actually follow their surveys and what they do in social media. And frankly, there's a lot of people who couldn't give a toss about any of that stuff, and they don't ever know that then that stuff even exists. I meet people like that all the time. They got no idea what's going on at Wizards of the Coast. They've got no idea about what's the latest books that came out, or that there's a survey they've got 2 weeks to respond to, or something like that. They've got no idea. So, but yeah, and I know other people like feats, so I think there needs to be the option. I just don't want it hard-baked. That would just restrict people coming into the game. I mean, my view is I want everybody playing, and that's from 5 years to right up. From 5 years of age, you should be able to play this game all the way up. That's always been my goal. Okay, but I want people who are a bit older to be able to play the game they want to play, and the younger kids, I want them to be able to play the game that they want to play. So you can't make exactly the same product for everybody. Big Kid. When dealing with a large group, how I stop the fighter from having 6 players around an enemy and just rinse and repeat their attacks. Okay. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, Notorious. I guess you're saying large group surrounds a single enemy and they just carve up that one enemy and move on. Is that what you're saying? I'm assuming that's what you mean. For those of you who were hoping for dice maps and miniatures, as soon as my lights show up and the 6K camera's mounted properly on the slider, and I can actually get the webcam, because this is just a webcam that does 4K. It's not the actual proper camera. So once that's actually all set up properly, then I'll be able to put everything out, and I'll be able to demonstrate stuff. So don't worry, that will come in the future. Drew. Sneak attack for the new Bugbear is so vague. Yes, it says something about a turn in the current combat. If an enemy casts a spell like Blur before initiative, then does that count against the surprise? Now, the new Bugbear is so vague. Are you talking now, Drew? Are you talking about the surprise attack, not the sneak attack? Okay, surprise attack. Yeah, that makes a bit more sense. So, Drew, are you talking about the Bugbear in what book? Are you talking about the Bugbear in the Monster Manual, or are you talking about the player option to play the Bugbear? Now, there's a player option to play a Bugbear in, is it Volo's Guide to Monsters? I think it's Volo's Guide to Monsters. Yep. Okay, that's what you mean, Big Kid. Okay, got it, Notorious. But there's a few different versions of the Bugbear now available. And that'll cause a lot of confusion for people. Or are you talking about, I believe the Bugbear is also in, is it Monsters of the Multiverse as well? I think it is. If I remember right, it's also there. Let me just have a look here. Because there's more than one version of that that Bugbear. if you're playing it as a player. Let me see if I can find, scroll down here, Bugbear details. I don't know that it was necessarily, yeah, so here, there's a whole bunch of them. So, oh, that's it, there it is, that's what I was looking for. So there's one in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, the Bugbear, and there'll be another one in, and I'm sure there were the monster race options in another book, which is now considered legacy content of all things. Ryan R, hey, thank you so much for the super chat. I do appreciate the $10 super chat. Thank you very much. I do hope you have a question for me after giving me so much money. You say love your content. I'm glad you like the content that I'm doing, and thanks for all the hard work. You're welcome. Look, it can only get better from here. I can assure you, I've not spared expense trying to do all of this, and I have not spared time to make sure it all works. Drew, you're talking about the Monsters of the Multiverse update. Do I have that book close by so I can talk to that? Because I probably need to have the entry out. I think I do. So let's talk about that monster, shall we? So here we're going to go. I'm going to get Arnold to look at you for a second while I go run around and find that book. I know it's not that far away. Okay, I got him. Crawl back into my spot. Right, let's shuffle. Thank you, Arnold, for keeping busy again. Okay, so let's go back to that question about the Bugbear. And don't worry, I will answer your question, Joseph. I see the question there. So when I said I had those books, they've been sitting beside my bed. I'm waiting to have time. So I do actually have the book. Do I like the book? Not really, but I will talk about it because I know people are going to want to be able to build stuff around it. So that's fine. So we'll deal with that. I did grab it. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I grabbed that because, well, yeah, I like Spelljammer. I was hopeful. So let's have a look at the Bugbear. Which page is it supposed to be on? That allows us to actually look at this Bugbear. There it is. It's on page 8. Page 8. And you're talking about surprise. Okay. All right. So Drew, you're talking about the 2d6 extra damage. Yeah, 2d6 extra damage. Gosh, didn't they used to have? I'm sure it was It was a bit more than that. Wasn't it a d8? I'm pretty sure it was a d8 in the past. It was quite a bit more. So your original question was. It's vague. Sneak attack. Sneaky. Surprise attack. There it is. If you hit a creature with an attack roll, the creature takes an extra 2d6 damage if it hasn't taken a turn yet in the current combat. Okay, it's not vague. It's actually pretty clear, Drew, what's going on here. As far as I can tell. You let me know if I haven't answered the question the way you wanted me to answer it, and that is, first off, this indicates to me that you can only use this surprise attack to hit a creature in the first round. So you can't use it again in the second round or the third round. Okay, it can only ever be used in one round, and that's the very first round. Okay, and then it says here, if you hit a creature with an attack roll, the creature takes an extra 2d6 damage if it hasn't taken a turn yet. Okay, so here's the thing. That means that you have to win initiative. Yeah? That means you have to win initiative. Because as far as I can tell, and I know where you're coming from now, I still kind of see what you're trying to say about this. Because in the past, you had to surprise your enemy to be able to do the extra damage, correct? That's what you're kind of saying. And now there's no real suggestion in that entry that you need to necessarily have surprised them. You just need to have a higher initiative. You need to make sure that they haven't taken a turn. So if you are surprised in the first round and the bugbear attacks, say, the fighter, and the fighter was surprised and didn't actually get to make an attack, but they took their turn because they were higher in the initiative, does that mean that because the bugbear doesn't get its surprise attack on that fighter because they've taken their turn even though they weren't able to do anything? I think that's what you're trying to say here, Drew. Correct? You'll let me know if that's not the question you're trying to ask. I think that's what you're trying to say. Because from what I'm reading here now with surprise attack, I get the impression that now you need to win initiative with your bugbear. Because it doesn't play out a lot like the monster. So the monster entry looks very different. Yep. So now it's about, like, as long as you go first, you get your extra damage. So it's a bit of a nerf, to be honest. Yep. This is one of the reasons why I don't like the races in the Monsters of the Multiverse. It's because they don't really bear any real resemblance to the actual monster in the monster book. Like, you know, if we're going to have them as playable races, like they need to actually resemble in most ways the actual monster itself. Otherwise, why are we playing it? Do you mean? Is it unbalanced? Of course it will be unbalanced, but then you don't have those monsters available in every single campaign. Like, they'll be used when it's appropriate. When you run an all-goblin campaign, when you have bugbears, orcs, and goblins, then you use them. And when you don't have a campaign like that, then you don't use them. But yeah, the surprise attack for the bugbear reads, if the bugbear surprises a creature and hits it with an attack during the first round of combat, the target takes an extra 7 or 2d6 damage for the attack. So in other words, the damage dice is the same, but it's different here now. Now you don't have to worry about surprising. So it's not important whether you surprise your enemy with your playable bugbear race. You just need to make sure that they haven't taken their turn yet. So it's going to be really important to have a high initiative for your feature to work. Correct? I think that's what you were trying to say. Drew, you will let me know if I'm off track in terms of what you were trying to get across. Okay. Yeah, I think the bugbear's surprise attack has nothing to do with surprise. There's nothing in here that suggests to me that you need to have actually surprised the enemy to use this feature. You just need to be higher in the initiative, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong about that. Okay, all right. Joseph, what do you do when players don't think to search for secret doors and items that need to be found to move the story? Do you just give it to them? No, I don't. I try not to have things that, look, if there's something that they have to find, then they have to find the secret door. If they have to find the secret item that's hidden to progress the story, well, I've created a big, huge block for myself. Now, some adventures do this, and there's not much you can do about it other than change it, right? I would usually create a workaround. Rather than you find the secret door, I'd just say, no, you just don't find the secret door, you don't find the secret item. There have been times where I've run adventures where the assumption is they're going to find the hidden magical weapon that will be instrumental in success. And in the end, I've done a workaround and like, okay, now there needs to be a way of still succeeding without having that magic item. Because they didn't actually bother looking for secret doors or secret items, or they never actually found them because they just didn't roll high enough. Do you know what I mean? Or they didn't manipulate their environment. I do a lot of manipulation of environment. If you do the right type of searching and you describe what you're doing, sometimes I don't bother with people rolling the dice. I just say, nah, it's cool. I don't usually bother getting people to roll a 5 or a 10 for a passive, for a perception check. I don't usually bother with that because that's easy. So why would I bother? That's like, oh, I mean, a 10 is like, oh, you see a door in front of you. I mean, good Lord. So I don't bother with those. But secret doors, I set them at like DC 20, 25. Secret items might be very difficult to find as well. So, yeah, I just do a workaround for it rather than, nah, they find it. You can do that if you want to, though. Right, so, okay, Big Kid's got that. Ziggy, what do you got here? As a DM, do you have a preference for how to manage player use of summonings or hirelings? I have seen a few people treat them as swarms. So usually I don't allow hirelings all the time, but if I have a small group, I would insist that the players have an animal companion or sidekicks or hirelings or something like that, just so that I don't have to worry about them constantly going down and having TPKs and me having to make huge adjustments to deal with that fact. Because as soon as you have less than 4 members in your party, it makes it very difficult to actually deal with a battle. So I always like, yeah, if I got to play a character who can summon a creature and they've got a small group, like I want them to do that. As for having a great huge herd of hirelings or animals following you, I have done it before. I haven't found it to be hugely successful. I am pretty brutal. I will kill off hirelings like you wouldn't believe, and animal companions, but I still want people to have them. But if you bring them into combat, they're going to die. I had a whole group. I think my group at one point had 12 porters, and they insisted I name every single one. But if they brought them to combat, they died. And more than a few of them died along the way as it was, because they wound up getting ambushed and like, there goes Jeffrey. Jeffrey just fell off the mountain. He got eaten by a rock and carried off. That's goodbye, Jeffrey. So, yeah. The bug, yeah, Zeal. So we're talking about alignment here with monsters, okay? So for me, I am happy for the alignments to be there for monsters because it sort of says to a player, if an orc is evil, then I don't need to feel guilty about killing the orc and taking its stuff, okay? Which is fine. Orcs aren't representative of any race in the real world. Okay, let's go to that there isn't a connection. There isn't a connection. People might decide there are connections, but there isn't a connection. And if there were a connection, then it shouldn't be in the game. But there isn't a connection. Okay, but here's where my thought is. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule. Like, although generally bugbears are evil and greedy and brutish and aggressive and just generally unpleasant to be around, there may be the occasional bugbear that's completely the opposite way. Now, because they grew up somewhere else or because of they're just different to everybody else. Like, and I do this a lot in my games. I present creatures that are not your typical sort of monster. And I do that deliberately in my games because it's fun, because it throws the player's expectations off and it breaks with tradition. And it also lets me do things that people were not expecting. And surprising your players and surprising yourself is one of the best parts of playing the game. So, yeah. But we don't need to, I'm not going to go into any more of that. We'll just keep going. Let me just see. I see there's a little bit of stuff coming down here. Okay, so I think Drew has expanded on his question here a bit. Our DM used blur before combat, said that took place before our bugbear's turn, first in initiative. Okay, so in other words, blur is on a monster, okay, and then said this took place before our bugbear's turn. Right. So before the combat started, they had blur on them. Fine. Dungeon Masters can do that. Yep. And then the monster who had blur on them also was first in initiative. So if they're first in initiative and they'd go first, then yes, your bugbear would not be able to use this feature. This is one of the reasons why I dislike the monsters in the monsters of the multiverse. Do you know what I mean? Because really what you want is you want surprise attack to work like the feature in the monster manual, Drew? Does that make sense? That's what I want. And so for me as a dungeon master and even a player, I don't want to play with any of this stuff unless it runs like the monster in the monster manual. Ziggy, it sounds bad, but trust me, after I figured out how to name all 12 of them, I wasn't that original. I can trust you, trust me. It presented me with a very amusing time as I figured out how to kill each one of them off in some peculiar manner. So yeah, it took a while, but we got there. So actually, they actually provided me with a lot of fun. And I think the porters cost them like, was it a copper piece a day to lug all their stuff around? I have to admit that nobody wanted to be a porter for them again after that, but that's all right. This is when they were going through the Isle of Dread and trying to collect. They tried to take a rock egg down a mountain, like that's with porters. That was something. Anyway, JP. Bugbear surprise attack. The monster manual clearly states that if the bugbear surprised a creature, the rules for surprise are applicable. Yeah. And yet, see, unfortunately, the bugbear in Monsters of the Multiverse doesn't work like that. And this is where your frustration is probably setting in. And this is why I don't think this is a good book. This is another reason why I don't encourage you necessarily to go and buy a lot of the player option stuff that are going to come out before 2024. Because you can see already that this is not going to be compatible with a lot of stuff that's going to be coming in the future. Do you mean? It just isn't going to keep up. I mean, a lot of the stuff isn't compatible with the stuff in the Spelljammer book. The Spelljammer book's races are very powerful, but then again, they are related to you know, astral travel and wild space. So maybe races out there are just tougher and more impressive. But you wouldn't want those races to be ported over to every world, because then the other races just can't keep up with them, can they? And I don't, I'm not too concerned about balance, but there's a point where you have to say, well, do we really want a smorgasbord, or do we want to be able to play something different when it makes sense? Like, so if I said, so JP is in my home group, and right now I play a wizard, Leonin, and JP is playing a monk elf. Is it elf? Is it a wood elf? I can't remember, JP. And so, you know, the next time we play, I might say, look, I'm going to restrict the races, and the only thing we're going to play is goblins, orcs, and bugbears. That's it. That's what you get to pick from, or some other thing. You can't play a human. You can't play the traditional races. We're going to play a different type of campaign. And there's no way that either myself or JP would tolerate that nonsense, because it doesn't make sense. Okay, Joseph, what do you got here? The PC gets advantage and the creature loses its turn in a surprise attack, or they just lost the turn. No, so no, I don't think that's what we're. I mean, I don't know where you're going with this, Joseph. But surprise attacks work it's very simple. If you know that the enemy is there, you're not surprised. If you are unaware that the enemy is there and they've hidden from you, or they're hiding from you. So hidden and hide are different. Hidden means you can't be seen and you can't be heard because you're not moving at all. Hide is just you're unseen, but you might be able to be you might be able to hear them because they're still moving potentially. Do you know what I mean? So while you're in combat, you can only hide. You cannot be hidden because you are still potentially moving during that round or turn. So it's not as good. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if you are surprised and you don't know the enemy's there, then you don't get to act. You don't get to do anything at all. And once that first round is gone, then you can do something. That's all that happens. I think you're suggesting a solution here. Yeah. Yeah, perspective always helps some, Ziggy. There's the right time to do stuff and a wrong time. Yes, a wood elf monk all the way. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Right. Although I suspect that if we played a monstrous campaign and we were all evil, JP would insist on a drow. Okay, cool keg computer. It's been a while. Hello. Just wanted to say hi and thank you for these. You're welcome. Look, I'm glad people are liking them. You're always looking forward to my videos when you have a 5e question. Well, I mean, hopefully you'll still want to watch my stuff when I don't deal with mechanical stuff. Like, you know, tomorrow I'm going to talk about the wolfware, which is not the same as a werewolf. It's kind of like that, but not. So a different type of monster. That's all right, Ziggy. I'll see you later. Thank you for the chat. Big kid. I would name them Bob, Rob, Robert, Robbie, Bobby, Roberto. Yeah, absolutely. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. So, yeah, the not a Drider. Spirit Wolf. I don't know. I don't know. You have to ask JP. He's not going to ask. He's probably working, man. He's probably working. He's just probably listening while he's doing his stuff. I've put him on the spot. Anyway, but yeah, no, so for me, the monster manual and the different sort of mechanics in here and so forth, if they don't line up with the playable options, you're not really playing that monster anymore or that creature anymore. You're playing something else. It's some sort of mutant creation. Cool kid computer. What do you got here? I will. I even enjoy your Wheeler Workshop videos back in the day. Yeah, well, yes. Well, that was when I was actually teaching carpentry. There are actually still some videos that I haven't released on that channel. And I keep sitting in there and like I look at it and I think, should I? Because it's a bit depressing for me. So it's like, anyway. No, for me, look, something like the Kobold doesn't have pack tactics and the monsters of the multiverse. What? Why? Oh, I don't get it. Because pack tactics is so good, so dungeon masters don't allow a kobold in every single game. This is Adventurers League. This is why this book was made. It was Adventurers League. Because Adventurers League, they don't have a choice. Dungeon masters have to take everything that comes along. If it's official, they got to use it. There's no restrictions. In the past, you had to use the core book, Player's Handbook, and one other book. And now that restriction is gone. So this thing here exists solely to contend with their public play stuff. Which is just not anywhere near as satisfying as it could have been, unfortunately. I mean, look, another good example of things that have happened in this Monsters of the Multiverse, for example, that I will come back and talk about this book and these playable options in the future, is the Aarakocra. Like, the Aarakocra used to have a speed of 50 feet when you fly. Now it's 30 feet. One, because Adventurers League again. Like, we don't want people to be able to move 50 feet and fly. It's too good. You can move too quickly. And even if you're worried about being up in the air and being targeted by ranged attacks, you would just fly 50 feet and then drop down below total cover, and so you can't be targeted, rather than to stay out in the open. Now you can pursue flying creatures much more easily if you play an Aarakocra. But why are you playing an Aarakocra in every single campaign? I still want my Aarakocra to fly 50 feet. Why? because there's a thing called the monster manual. And if I open to the Aarakocra, apparently the monster itself flies pretty fast, right? There's the maths in there that sort of indicates, oh look, it's got a walking speed of 20 feet and a fly speed of 50 feet. So I'm now just playing a bird person. Do you know, why call it an Aarakocra if you're going to give it a speed of 30 feet? Just call it a bird person or bird folk instead of an Aarakocra. You're not playing an Aarakocra, you're playing a bird folk. This little Tweety bird that goes 30 feet. That's what we're doing. Cool Keg, what do you got here? I DM'd a 2-player adventure once. I gave them some pets. Yep. Now, pets aren't for battle, so it's not really a pet. A pet would, I suppose, I guess you could say it's a pet, but it's an animal companion, right? Even when they weren't rangers. See, yes, and I encourage this. Like, if you only got 2 players, then give them all an animal companion. They'll love it. Do you know what I mean? And you can use the sidekick rules to build it so that it can actually survive in combat. Do you know what I mean? And then hopefully they'll multi-class or take one of them will take some ability to heal themselves or some sort of magical spell casting, so they can kind of keep up later on. And the pets can do all the hard yakka in the front line. You know what I mean? Those sidekicks are actually pretty good at surviving in battle, as it happens. I've seen them work really effectively in Dragon of Ice by a Peak. JP knows this because we used one or two, I think it was. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, yes, it can be a bit of a mess, but I mean, ultimately, it's easier for players to control a full-blown character and a simplified animal companion or sidekick than to play 2 characters. And you don't want the Dungeon Master having to do all of that. Spirit Wolf. Yeah, the objective is to have fun. Yeah, everybody has to have fun, not just the players, but also the Dungeon Master. For me, it's not fun to include these monstrous races and not to have them like the original Monster Manual monsters. Like, it's not cool at all. Why would I bother doing that? I don't get it. So let's have a look at this. It's interesting. I'm noticing this poll is getting filled out quite nicely. So what else was in here in terms of creatures that I was like, what's going on here? Some of them, they didn't even change at all. Like, some of them just did. Oh my gosh. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was really confused. I didn't know what I was looking for, or looking at, actually, when I saw the Hobgoblin. The Hobgoblin, I was like, what the heck is this? I mean, I'm all for going, you know, being different, but the Hobgoblin was so strange. I didn't know what to make of it. He's playing a lute that is an axe. Kenku, they changed the Kenku quite a bit. I think the Kenku created a lot of problems because of how the monster works, and so to make it as a playable race is actually quite difficult. And they're trying to figure out how to sort of get around that by using the mimicry ability. But I mean, honestly, I think the easiest way was to simply give the Kenku a language that they could speak and be done with it. Lizard folk got changed a bit too. A lot of this got reprinted. Do you know, I look at the orc in Monsters of the Multiverse, and it looks so similar to the half-orc that I've played in previous versions of the game. Does anybody notice that? Like, it's so similar. And they've included a lot. I have to say, it's quite nice to see the turtle in here, because I thought the turtle was quite cool. But I would not say any of this is necessarily definitively where we're going to stop. Do you know what I mean? I think it's gone part way. And the monsters, yeah, I can't use those monsters. I have to make too many changes. So yeah, I think I've said enough for today. I think it is actually time for me to go. So we'll end this poll here. I can assure you we'll be back next week to talk about magic in your game and the mechanics behind that. Same time, same day. And there are, of course, all the other things that I'm doing as well. There should be a Dungeon Master Roundtable live on the Bearbard Tales Twitch channel. I understand that Alex is going to actually put it up live on his Twitch channel. Probably not YouTube, but Twitch. Anyway. Okay. Where are we? Yes. Come on, Pinky in the brain. Come here. Here we go. There it is. Gotcha. So I just want to say thank you to all of my patrons who help support me so that I can do these sorts of programs. And I also want to thank everybody who watches my videos and my live streams. I know a lot of the stuff is very long, okay? I do get it, but so thank you for watching it. It does help, particularly if you're not blocking the ads. I do appreciate that. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the night, the morning, the afternoon, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.